Hi, and welcome to the Dynamic Duel Podcast, a weekly show where we review superhero films and debate the superiority between Marvel and DC by comparing their characters in stat-based battle simulations. I'm Marvelous Joe.
And I'm Johnny DC.
And in our countdown to our 100th episode, this is the 97th episode. We only have 3 left to go before the big 100. But honestly, I'm finding it hard to get excited about anything due to the tragic news today of Stan Lee's passing, which we will be talking about later on this episode.
Yeah, it's the only news item we're going to be covering, because honestly, when Stan Lee dies, what other news is there?
Yeah, nothing else really compares.
But this will be a review episode. We're going to be reviewing Captain America, the First Avenger.
And we are reviewing that in honor of Veterans Day, which was this past weekend. So this episode is dedicated to all of the men and women that have served for us in the armed forces, of which Stan Lee was actually a member. He served in the Army, I believe, during World War II. Just a heads up before we talk about Stan Lee, though, a reminder that next month we will be holding an art auction of the Detective Chimp and Howard the Duck art that was drawn for us by an artist named Shannon V. Sapinter, who you can follow on Instagram at the handle @artofsvs. And the proceeds for that auction will be going to a charity called Women Helping Women, which focuses on crisis intervention and prevention advocacy for gender-based violence. So it's a good cause. Definitely look forward to that auction next month.
Yeah, when you post something to eBay for charity, the auction only lasts 10 days.
Right.
So it'll be going up later in December, but if you know anyone who really likes, comic books and like obscure characters, just a huge geek, they would probably love this artwork, which you could see on our Instagram.
Yeah, it might make a great gift for the holidays too. You never know.
Exactly.
Quick shout out to HLR Burrus and Mashizzle423 on behalf of Jace Crump for leaving iTunes reviews for us. We've been asking for iTunes ratings for the past month or so because we're trying to get to 200 ratings so that we could become critics on Rotten Tomatoes. What's funny about this is that Jace Crump actually took his friend's phone and then posted a review on behalf of himself because he doesn't have an Apple device.
Right.
And so we encourage everybody to do this.
Yeah, Jace Crump is doing the Lord's work.
That's the kind of enthusiasm we're looking for. Yeah, just take other people's phones and rate us. Or maybe don't do that. I don't know. If you know the person and they're cool with it, yeah, sure, borrow your friend's phone. That's cool. But speaking of no prizes,
it's no prize time. So no prize is an award that Marvel used to give out, Stan Lee used to give out, up until the 90s for fans. Our version, the Dynamic Duel No Prize, is a digital award that we post on social media that I personally draw for those who we feel gave the best answer to our question of the week.
Last week's question was, of all the Batman villains that we have not yet seen in a live-action film, which one do you want to see the most, and who would you cast in that role?
Yeah, we got a lot of great answers. Like, Batman just has the best rogues gallery, period.
No, that would be Spider-Man.
Oh my gosh, no. Honorable mention is going to Ken Johnson for his answer of Deathstroke, although Deathstroke was in Justice League.
Right, yeah, he doesn't count that, and he would cast Timothy Oliphant, who I think would make a fantastic Deathstroke.
Adam Spies also chose Deathstroke, but would have cast Stephen Lang.
That was another great casting choice,
That's a great casting choice.
Both of them probably better than Joe Manganiello, probably.
Probably.
Although, I still would like to see what he would bring to the role in a Batman film, which is never going to happen.
No, it was only going to happen in Ben Affleck's film. The other Spies brother, John Spies, gave the answer Hugo Strange, played by Keith David, which is an inspired choice.
Yeah, it took me back for a little bit because I was like, what, Keith David? But then, you just look at the guy's smile. Like even if it's an innocent smile that he's giving, it still looks sinister.
Especially with Hugo Strange's glasses, his Morpheus glasses.
Yeah.
And he just has a great voice too. Great choice.
That would be a great, yeah. And you could check out both Adam and John Spies on the Blast from Our Past podcast, so definitely check that out.
Yeah, those guys, they have a casting segment where they'll cast old movies and stuff. So these guys know how to cast, yeah, for sure. Those were great choices. Also getting honorable mention is Jacob Bell, who gave the answer Red Hood, played by Zac Efron.
Who would make a good Red Hood, actually. He looks kind of like a grown-up, cocky Robin. Although he might make it better as Dick Grayson. Do you think he feels like Jason Todd to you?
Yeah, he does. I think I see him more as Jason Todd.
Really?
Because he's a little bit more cocky.
Okay.
But yeah, I thought it was a great choice. Joel Seagrave also said Red Hood, but who cast Jensen Ackles.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty convinced after seeing his Halloween costume this year.
That was fantastic. That was a fantastic costume.
That was a really cool costume.
That helmet was so cool.
Yeah.
But Jensen Ackles has been a fan favorite for years. He really needs to get that role.
Yeah, seriously. Joel Seagrave also gave the answer Man-Bat, played by Michael C. Hall.
Right.
A lot of people have wanted to see Michael C. Hall play
the Riddler, I think.
Batman.
Oh, Batman?
Yeah.
I think he'd make a pretty good Batman. He was already kind of Batman in the Dexter show. He was like murderous Batman. But yeah, I haven't seen Michael C. Hall in a while, so yeah, it'd be great to see him in something.
Harrison Fox gave the answer Condiment King, played by Jason Segel, which if anyone's going to play Condiment King, yeah, Jason Segel. Victor also gets honorable mention for giving the answer Owlman, played by Armie Hammer, which is another inspired choice because Armie Hammer was almost Batman in another universe,
right?
Which is exactly what Owlman is,
right? Yeah, well, yeah, Armie Hammer was going to play Batman in the Justice League Mortal film that was being directed by George Miller way back in the day, about a decade ago.
Yeah, that was tanked because of the writer's strike at the time,
right? And in the comics, Owlman is an alternate universe Bruce Wayne, right? Like Thomas Wayne Jr.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. It's a nice little like Easter egg almost right there. Good job, Victor.
Then the last honorable mention goes to Caleb Albers for his answer of Hush, which was the correct answer. The winner this week also gave the answer Hush, but Caleb chose the actor Matt Bomer. And I kind of see a complication with that choice because Matt Bomer is currently playing Negative Man in the Doom Patrol series on DC Universe.
Right. But it's not DCEU, but...
No, but just Hush... If you're not familiar with him, he kind of looks like Negative Man.
Right.
You know, he's completely bandaged and he wears like a brown coat. If Matt Bomer also played Hush, people would be like, is that Negative Man?
Is that the same character?
Right.
Yeah.
The characters just look a little bit too similar.
Yeah. But congratulations to Lara Nuki for giving the answer of Hush cast as Brad Pitt.
And if Batman's going to be Ben Affleck, why can't Hush be Brad Pitt?
I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's a great choice. Yeah, because Hush, who, you know, is Thomas Elliott, Bruce Wayne's childhood friend, he's like a brown-haired Bruce Wayne. So, yeah, Brad Pitt, all the way.
Are you saying Brad Pitt is a brown-haired Ben Affleck?
I guess.
All right.
But I mean, I wanted to go with Hush because, you know, in the famous Jeff Loeb, Jim Lee storyline, you know, you had like the entire Batman Rogues Gallery. So all of these choices that we got from all of our honorable mentions, like all those choices could be in this Hush film.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that could totally work. That'd be great to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, congrats again to Lara Nuki for winning this episode's No Prize. If you want to win a No Prize, go ahead and stay tuned to later on this episode when we ask another question of the week. With that out of the way, on to the news. All right, so in probably what will be the hardest news to talk about since we started this podcast, the man, the legend, Generalissimo himself, Stan Lee, has passed away at the age of 95 earlier today, Monday, November 12th. They have not released how he passed away, but we have to assume that it was due to complications of being sick in his advanced age. His wife died just last year due to complications from a stroke.
Yeah.
Times have been really hard for him over the past year, and it was kind of sad to see the state that he's been in since that point in time. And we extend our deepest condolences to his brother and his daughter and every other member of his family and close friends. I feel like he had a ton of close friends because so many people have so many amazing, great things to say about him. He was just a wonderful guy.
He's one of a kind.
Really.
You know, there really wasn't like any equivalent of Stan Lee in DC. Maybe like the closest would have been like Julius Schwartz. But even then, like Stan Lee is a pop culture icon.
Yeah, for sure. He did so much, not just for Marvel, but for comics themselves. You know, of course, he's the co-creator of Fantastic Four, the co-creator of Spider-Man and Doctor Strange and Iron Man, and all the Avengers and the X-Men and the Hulk and so many others.
So many.
It's incredible. The impact that he's had on the industry cannot be overstated, I think. Not just in terms of the characters that he brought to us, but everything that he inspired along the way.
Yeah, massive inspiration for a ton of people, everyone in the industry.
Yeah. I heard earlier this morning, one of our coworkers named Ariana, she came up to us and told us that Stan Lee had passed away. And I just really couldn't believe it. I was like, no, like I wasn't ready for this, you know?
I don't want to say I saw it coming, but just following the news around him for the past few years, I'm not surprised. It was going to happen sooner rather than later, I think.
Yeah, but just not today. Maybe, you know, I guess you're never really ready for these things, but it's always hard to take when you hear about a celebrity passing away that you didn't know personally, but you feel like you had such a close connection to. It feels like you are losing a friend, and that's kind of what this feels like. It's really hard. But I was fortunate enough to see him in person at Denver Comic-Con one year. I was up high in the balcony, but I got to hear him being interviewed, and he was just such a sweet guy. By this point, he had already gone mostly deaf, so he had to work with an assistant who was communicating the interview questions to him. But he was able to speak really well. Such a funny guy. He was so quick-witted.
Really intelligent. It always came across in his writing. And the fact that, just his approach on approaching readers like they were also intelligent. I think that won over a lot of people to Marvel.
Right. Yeah, he pioneered presenting superheroes as flawed characters, as human beings, and not just like these icons of myth. And in his work, he also, took a stance against racism and bigotry, and really took a stance against drug use in the 70s as well. Mm-hmm. He stood up for a lot of things that were worth standing up for. He was a hero in his own right.
Yeah.
And we're going to miss him. He's such a great storyteller that people are going to be enjoying his creations for decades to come.
I think a few of his cameos for at least the next year.
Yeah, he's filmed his cameo for Captain Marvel and for the Avengers. I don't know if we're going to get any more cameos after that.
Yeah.
Because they haven't really started filming. Although they do sometimes film these things in advance. And yeah, that's going to be really hard. The day we see a Marvel movie that doesn't have a Stan Lee cameo in it is going to feel like something's missing, I think.
I'm sure they're going to dedicate the next Avengers film towards him, which is kind of appropriate.
They'll probably dedicate Captain Marvel to him, I would think.
Yeah, I guess that is the next one.
And probably also Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, since he helped co-create Spider-Man. So.
That's right, for sure.
But this news brings us to our question of the week. What was your favorite all-time Stan Lee cameo and why? He's had a lot of cameos spanning the years. The first one that I could think of is Trial of the Incredible Hulk. He was probably in one before that. I know he was like a juror in the Hulk one, though. But yeah, going all the way back, what was your favorite Stan Lee cameo? He even cameoed in a few video games as well. Yeah, write your answer and post it to our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or you can email us at dynamicduelpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll pick our favorite answer and draw that person a Dynamic Duel No prize that we'll post to social media. Excelsior, Stanley.
Excelsior.
And with that, we'll go ahead and get into our Captain America, the First Avenger review. All right, Captain America, the First Avenger. Usually we start these reviews off by giving a spoiler warning, but the movie is about 7 years old now, so I can't imagine that a ton of people have not seen this film yet.
I'm sure there's quite a few who haven't. I actually just saw it for the first time yesterday.
Yeah, but you're a Marvel hater, so that doesn't count. Mostly everybody else has seen this movie. And the reactions to it are across the board. There are some people who really like this, and there are some people that really don't care for it. Mm-hmm. When I first saw the movie, I think I was in the camp that didn't care for it so much. We'll get into why later, but actually the more I see this film, the more I appreciate what it did to set up the Marvel Universe. And before I get into my overall thoughts, I want to commend the writers and producers for choosing to set this film nearly entirely in the 1940s. I think it was just a brilliant choice. And back when they were working on this film, before we knew what the story was, I think many people assumed like half of the film would take place in the past, with the other half taking place in the present, showing his struggle as a man out of time. Like back in 2009, it seemed like a really ballsy move to have this period piece here, and then just count on the fact that there would be sequels to tell the rest of Steve's story.
Right.
It was a move that paid off wonderfully, because to really know Steve as a present-day character is to understand where he came from, his World War II foundations, his mindset as a member of the greatest generation, and the sense of selflessness and morality implicated with the soldiers of that era, the righteousness.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think films like Wonder Woman owes a lot to the decisions made by this film.
Yeah, I mean, I had always heard that before I saw Wonder Woman. I do have to say that I definitely think Wonder Woman was better made than this.
Yeah, production-wise?
Yeah.
Probably.
Just, I think the comparisons can be made entirely just to it being a period piece.
Yeah, and being a war period piece as well.
Yeah.
My overall thoughts on this film will probably sound worse than, my specific thoughts on it, because although I enjoyed much of this film, at the end of the day, I do wish that they had gone in a very different direction with it. My problems have entirely to do with the tone that they decided to go with, which is, the pulp matinee serial style.
Kind of felt at times like they didn't know what kind of tone to approach it with. It was at points very pulpy,
right,
and at other points, it was trying to nail that Marvel brand, which isn't pulpy.
I would agree with that, definitely. I mean, I don't hate the pulp adventure style of filmmaking. I really enjoyed movies like Indiana Jones and The Rocketeer and Sky Captain,
yeah,
and the Max Fleischer Superman cartoons, But I personally do wish that they would have went with something more realistic and less, I guess, cheesy, because, the pulp style can get a little bit cheesy.
Yeah. Marvel always has an approach to filmmaking where it's, they mix genres.
Yes.
Right? So you probably wanted them to do a superhero war film.
Yes.
But instead we got a superhero pulp.
Right, exactly. I wanted something with more emotional impact that we could take more seriously. Do you know what I'm saying? I guess ultimately what I wanted was Saving Private Ryan, and what we got was The Rocketeer. You look at the sequels, like Winter Soldier, Civil War, and those films, they take the character of Captain America very seriously.
Yeah.
Winter Soldier's Cap is a visceral character who does not feel like he came from this fantastical World War II setting. He's serious enough to feel like he came from, a more real World War II setting.
Yeah. But I mean, comparing the first Avenger to The Rocketeer is not a bad comparison, because The Rocketeer was a good movie.
It was. Yeah. Yeah. And in many ways, I feel like this film is the spiritual successor to The Rocketeer. I mean, they hired the same director.
Yeah, Joe Johnston.
Yeah. And, despite the fact that this is the stylistic route that they chose to take, in terms of great cinematic pulp action adventures, I'd have to say that Captain America is among the finest ever made, I think. Certainly character-wise, at the very least, I care way more about Steve Rogers as a character than I did about Sky Captain, for sure.
That's true, but I don't know if it's better than The Rocketeer.
I care more about Steve Rogers than I do about the Rocketeer guy.
Really?
I don't even know his name. I even find Steve Rogers more compelling than Indiana Jones. Is that blasphemy? Can we say that Chris Evans' Captain America can stand toe-to-toe with Harrison Ford's Indiana Jones?
I think billions of dollars say yes.
I think so. Yeah, and it's testament to the characters. This isn't really a story-driven piece. It's more of a character-driven piece, I think, because of the standout characters. And, the story itself was pretty simple. But let's go into the character breakdown. Let's talk about Steve Rogers and Captain America. So when the casting announcement was made that Chris Evans was going to be Captain America, I'll admit I wasn't immediately sold. Out of the actors that were in the running, I was actually pulling for John Krasinski, because I could easily see him pulling off a buff but sincerely moral man, because, he's pretty much a puppy dog as Jim Halpert in The Office.
Right.
I saw Evans as mostly a comedic actor. I'd seen him in Not Another Teen Movie, The Perfect Score, and the Fantastic Four films, and I was wrong.
Yeah, he is a great actor. He sells me as Captain America every time he's in a film.
Yeah, he really proved here how great of a dramatic actor he is, and how well he can turn off that kind of comedic cockiness from some of his earlier roles and really inhabit the sincerity, the resoluteness, and the action as well, in a way that few other actors can, I think.
He comes across as really authentic.
Yes.
When someone who is a star of his caliber, I think it would be a challenge for them to do that. How could a star come across as humble?
Yeah, that's a great point. He brings the authenticity really well, and it's interesting to see how he could bring both humility to some roles and extreme cockiness to other roles.
Yeah, I'm thinking of his role in Scott Pilgrim or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. It's complete opposites. That's what I'm saying. He's a really good actor.
He has a broad range, I think,
exactly.
is what we learned from this movie. It doesn't hurt that the dude is just ripped to shreds as well. I mean, damn. He got really built for this. It was crazy.
Yeah.
But I also thought he did well playing the scrawny Steve as well. I mean, that was done with special effects. And while the special effect itself was hit or miss, sometimes it was really impressively done, and sometimes it just looked god awful.
It looked like a floating head.
Yeah, sometimes.
They messed up on the size of his head. It didn't quite match the neck size.
Right.
It was weird.
Or they chopped off his chin just a little bit too much or something.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was a little weird on some parts, but I think overall I was impressed with the special effect. But as Scrawny Steve, forgoing the special effects and everything like that, I thought he acted really well as this kid who just wanted to make a difference in the world, who just wanted to serve his country so bad.
Right. Yeah, that was palpable.
Let's talk about Johann Schmidt, aka the Red Skull. Hugo Weaving nailed this role. His performance is tainted a little bit by the fact that we know he didn't particularly enjoy playing the Red Skull, according to interviews he had since the film was made, but I really did enjoy his performance. He just has like the perfect gaunt facial features for the role, you know, like the high cheekbones and the furrowed brow, and I liked the accent.
The costuming, the acting was great. The character was not great.
You don't think so?
No.
I like the changes that they made to the character. I like how they made him a scientist who essentially believes in magic. And how the Red Skull itself, like it wasn't a mask or it wasn't a side effect of one of his toxins. It was a side effect of the super soldier serum that he took. And he has the same powers as Captain America and is a physical match for him. I liked those changes that they made for this film.
I always thought that was canon.
No.
Because I remember like the first Captain America movie that they made like in the 90s.
Right.
That like never made it to
the
theaters.
Italian Red Skull?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he took the super soldier serum as well.
I think so.
Yeah, so I always thought that was the Red Skull.
No, in the comics, he was a guy, he was a bellhop for Hitler, and Hitler, like, saw how crazy he was and, you know, gave him a red mask. And then later on, his face actually did turn to a red skull because one of his poisons that he would use on people to kill them would turn their faces into red skull. And he got exposed to it, but he was already somewhat immune to the toxins, but not necessarily all of the effects. And then later on, he had his mind transplanted into a clone of the body of Steve Rogers. So
Right.
at that point, he did have the super soldier serum, and he was able to go toe-to-toe with Cap.
Okay.
But that's kind of how it worked in the comics.
Okay, well then I agree with you. The changes they made for this film were better than what they did in the comics.
Yeah, I think his motivations as well were pretty interesting. They worked better here with the Thor movie having just come out a few months prior to this theatrical release date. I think if the Cap movie came out before Thor without that like Asgardian context, the Red Skull's intent to acquire godlike power would just look like lunacy. But since Thor came out first, we know that he's actually not crazy and that these gods do exist and that this power can be obtained through the Infinity Stones.
Right.
So what did you have a problem with?
I thought his motivations were really generic. I thought the character didn't come across as particularly menacing, really, or very threatening. The stakes of the film were just, he wants to blow up cities or threaten cities and take control of them. I don't know what he wanted.
He wanted, I think, people to recognize him as a god. And I think through the destruction of these cities, he would achieve that because people would come to realize how much power he had through the organization of Hydra and the weapons that they've created.
It just doesn't seem like a very good motivation.
I mean, it's very generic, world conquest.
Right.
It's a fairly generic motivation, I would agree. But it seems kind of fitting for
a Nazi?
The villains of the time. And a Nazi character, of course. And it's kind of weird to call him a Nazi, too, because it was interesting how they differentiated Hydra from the Nazis in this. Because the Red Skull, was he a Nazi? Like, he even said, we can grow no further in Hitler's shadow. I don't know if he shared Hitler's ideals other than their quest for power.
I think he did at one point, but then he said that of course Hitler doesn't like me anymore. I no longer fall under his Aryan ideal.
Yeah. And it was kind of weird because, in the comics, Red Skull is a straight up Nazi. So I'm not quite sure how I feel about the change that they made in that regard. I think it just kind of falls in line with how disinterested Marvel seemed to be in basing this in reality. They wanted to make it clear that this was far removed from history and realism. They didn't want to touch on the horrors of war or the horrors of the Holocaust. And I think they missed an opportunity there to strike an emotional impact and see what it really would have been like if a super soldier was able to help out with those atrocities of World War II.
That's true. That's
one of the main problems that I have with the film, I think. It goes back to the tone. Again, I think if they didn't go with this pulpy serial tone, if they would have went with something more like The Thin Red Line or whatever, we would have had a much more impactful film.
I mean, this came out before Marvel was owned by Disney, but
they were just going through their transitions. Actually, this came out after Marvel was acquired by Disney.
Oh, really?
But the film was actually shooting while talks were going on, so Disney really had no creative input, I don't think.
Well, you have to imagine that the talks were going on long before the public was even aware of them.
Yeah, Marvel.
So maybe that was one of the things that inspired the tone for this film.
That's entirely possible. Let's move on to Peggy Carter. I love Haley Atwell. She took what's not really even a standout role and really made it stand out. Like, if I had a Marvel crush, I think Haley Atwell's Peggy Carter would be it. She's tough. She's brilliant. She's absolutely stunning. Especially in that red dress. Ugh, kill me. Ah. She's like the perfect woman, besides my wife. I haven't watched this film since Agent Carter was canceled, and it really made me miss that show. I really love her character.
She definitely had, like, a charisma about her in this role. And I imagine, like, if she had her own TV show to really flesh out the character, she would be, like, really appealing, even more appealing. I could totally see that.
Yeah. She was just so adept. I think she was, like, as adept a love interest for Steve Rogers in this film as Steve Trevor was in the Wonder Woman film. He was an adept character too. They kind of made a great team.
In a way, I mean, I could totally see this film without Peggy Carter. Like, I'm not sure she played as significant a role as Steve Trevor did in the Wonder Woman film.
Explain yourself.
Okay, so, like, Steve Trevor was the reason that Wonder Woman left Themyscira.
Uh-huh.
Peggy Carter wasn't the reason that Captain America wanted to go fight in the war. She was in this movie to be a love interest.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not entirely
sure. She really wasn't. I mean, like, nothing really came out of that, did it?
No, not really, sort of.
It was heartbreaking, though, their love story.
In a way, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, she's the best. All right, let's move on to James Buchanan, Bucky Barnes. Sebastian Stan, of course, great as Bucky. I really love how they changed the Steve-Bucky dynamic from the comics. Here, they're more like brothers as opposed to, Bucky being a sidekick. I really like that.
Yeah.
It's even easier to appreciate his performance here knowing that he would return later as the Winter Soldier in subsequent Captain America and Avengers films.
Yeah.
So you see that character development over time. Like here, he's fairly straight-laced, acts like a big brother. But later on, he becomes such a dark, mysterious, kind of terrifying character. And it's interesting.
So part of me really wishes I would have watched this before The Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
Because watching this from the point of view that he's going to become the Winter Soldier made me really appreciate him. And I think, I may not have really cared for Bucky if I would have seen the first Avenger first. Uh-huh. But it would have been really awesome to be in the theaters and be like, that's fucking Bucky. Oh my gosh. He was lame. Now he's awesome.
Like when he died in this movie, it wasn't really tragic for me because, like, even though I wasn't 100% sure that they would be bringing him back as the Winter Soldier, I knew that in the canon, he didn't really die in World War II. So I assumed that they would be bringing him back. But I remember, like, people like my wife were like, oh, I can't believe Bucky died. And I was like, he'll be back.
Just wait.
Just wait. Give it a few years. Let's talk about I Want to Pair Up Colonel Chester Phillips by Tommy Lee Jones and Dr. Abraham Erskine, played by Stanley Tucci, because I think these two great veteran character actors kind of fulfill the same role within the story, which is, somewhat comedic relief, but also I think they did a good job of adding weight to this film.
Oh, for sure.
There were some of my favorite characters in the entire movie. They almost made that first half of the movie, those two characters.
I was just thinking of the scene when Dr. Erskine is like, no, I don't have a procedure tomorrow. I could drink this.
He's like, did you save me into the schnapps? Yes, but not as much as I should have.
Yeah.
And the interactions between Phillips and Erskine was pretty good, too. Like when Phillips was complaining about how they were going to go with Rogers, and he's like, look at him, he's so scrawny, he's making me cry, or something like that.
Yeah.
I feel like these guys, they didn't lean into the pulp aspect too much. They weren't like caricatures. They were characters.
Erskine kind of was. But he sold it, though. He definitely sold it.
Yeah. I think a character that was definitely more of a pulpy caricature was Arnim Zola, played by Toby Jones. He's another veteran actor, and while I thought he looked the part, I thought his accent was frequently awkward, and maybe he leaned too much into that pulp aspect and was a little melodramatic at some parts. Like the part where they figure out how to use the cube as a power source, and he's like, "This will change the world." It was kind of ridiculous. He's more like a cartoon scientist than an actual character.
But even that being said, like when he was being interrogated, like that was a great scene.
That was a great scene. Yeah, I'll have to say that. Yeah, in some of his more subtle scenes, like the one he had with Tommy Lee Jones, I did think that was great. And I wonder if he was playing off of Tommy Lee Jones' more straightforward approach. I'm not sure. I think that's pretty much most of the characters. Let's go ahead and get into the story highlights. The first big highlight for me for the movie was the Stark Expo / World's Fair, because we got to look at the android Human Torch.
I saw that. I totally forgot about that.
I thought that was a really cool touch.
That was cool.
And it was really the scene that really set up the themes of the film. When Steve goes to try his hand at recruitment for another time, and he has a discussion with Bucky about how men are laying down their lives and he doesn't have any right to do any less, and they have this argument, and Bucky's like, right, because you have nothing to prove. We get to see Steve Rogers' selflessness and his sense of duty, and we see, Bucky's sense of protection over this kid who, he does have to stand up for often, and who he probably does see as a little brother.
Yeah. There's a lot of heart in that scene.
Yeah,
and, you could see why Stanley Tucci was kind of drawn to Steve Rogers, and maybe he had been scouting him before because he definitely had his file. Who knows how long it took him to assemble that file? Mm-hmm. But you understand the character of Steve Rogers and why he wants what he wants.
Yeah, there were some nice little dialogue touches too, like don't win the war till I get there and things like that. I thought those were just great. Yeah. The next highlight I think was the basic training montage scenes.
I feel bad for Steve Rogers.
Yeah. I did like the scene with the flag though, where the drill sergeant's like, if you get that flag, you get a ride back home to base, and no one's gotten it in 20 years, and they all try to climb up the pole to get it. But Steve, who's lagging behind, he walks up and he takes out the pin that's holding up the pole and he just removes the flag that way. Just using his brain instead of his brawn.
Right.
Just little touches like that really endear yourself to a character. They're charming.
Yeah, and the grenade scene. I mean...
Oh, yeah.
Like, who would do that? Only the best of people would do that. I would never do that.
Only the most selfless of people. And like, some may say that was like a suicidal act, but it because of the work that they had done to establish this character as like the most selfless human being around, it worked.
It shows that he's not like the other guys. He's not training to kill people and be superior to other people. He's there to save lives.
Because he genuinely, I think, cares about other people.
Yeah, I mean, the earlier scene when he was first talking with Erskine, and he was like, I don't want to kill anybody. I just don't like bullies.
Right.
That's Captain America. And that's also like Superman, in a way, But I think I've mentioned this before, the way Marvel is able to pull off Captain America and his good nature, his moral center, in a way that DC hasn't been able to do yet with Superman in these newer films.
Right, and still make him seem interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
He's not just a goody two-shoes character.
Exactly.
Right.
You like him.
Yeah.
And he's not boring.
Yeah, I love the character they created with this movie, and a lot of that was really laid down in these training scenes, I think.
Yeah.
Jumping to Project Rebirth scene, when he actually gets the super soldier serum, I thought that was another great scene that really established who he was as a character, especially the part where, they're exposing him to the Vita rays, and he's like screaming out in pain, and, Peggy's like freaking out, telling him to stop it, and he's like, no, I can do this. He has that inner drive, he has that inner strength to keep going through with this painful process. I thought it was a great moment.
Yeah, that was a cool scene. I think it's like one of the more iconic scenes in the film.
Uh-huh.
Just being in the machine,
right,
and becoming Captain America.
Yeah.
And then the reveal, that was, cool.
That was such a great reveal. It's like, dang, I really wish I looked like that.
Damn, where can you get me some of that super soldier serum?
I like his line in response to Peggy when she asked him, how does he feel? And he was like, taller. I thought that was a perfect line because it would be the first thing that you noticed. The eye level has changed.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of clever. Let's move on to the USO scene. They're using him as a patriotic propaganda character, and I thought that was the perfect way to rationalize why he would be wearing this outfit in war.
It was a fantastic rationale. I had no idea that was going to be in the film. I was kind of surprised. And yeah, I had to appreciate it for sure when they did it.
It's something that's totally believable for the time period that they would use this, propaganda character to help sell bonds.
Right.
In the same way that they used, like Uncle Sam. Except this was more of an action hero that they could use to sell, toys and movies and things like that.
And the character did that in the comics,
Right, exactly.
The Captain America, would say, bundle up your comics and sell them.
Recycle them.
For
the war effort.
That's one of the things that made comics so valuable.
Right.
Because they became so rare.
Yeah. Captain America himself in real life, in our world, was a propaganda piece in comic form.
Right.
And that's the method they chose to use to introduce, all those quirky elements in this film. And it was just brilliant. Especially like when they're singing the song and the homage that they paid to Captain America #1, where he's punching Hitler in the face.
Right.
Whichever writer thought of that, of using him as a USO tool, I want to shake his hand, because anything else I feel like would have felt corny. Just, you're a super soldier, put on this flag and then go fight in there. It doesn't make
so many
sense.
problems.
Right. There was an interesting little moment within this Star Spangled Man montage where he's walking downstairs signing an autograph on a comic book, and he runs into this blonde girl who comes up to him and is like, "Hi." And she's, looking at him with doe eyes and everything like that. And he's realizing that he's becoming like this sex symbol as well as this patriotic guy. And the actress that plays that blonde girl is the same actress that played Star-Lord's mom.
Oh, really?
So in my head, I like to think that the woman that approached Captain America at that moment
Was Star-Lord's grandmother?
was Star-Lord's grandmother, and that Steve Rogers is actually Star-Lord's maternal grandfather. That's what I like to think.
Wow. All right. They fondued.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Later on, he goes overseas and takes the show overseas, but it's not as well received because, the audience isn't as, 12, which is the line that he says. I thought that was a great moment right there. I really like that moment when he's talking to Peggy and, he's drawing the illustration of the dancing monkey. And actually, that's true to the comics, too, because in the comics, Steve does have a degree in illustration. That's what he was really good at growing up. He wasn't good at athletics, but he was really good at drawing. So that was cool how they kind of worked that little character aspect. He tells Peggy that, he's like overseas, where the enemy is, and he's able to fight. He's physically capable. He says he feels like he finally got everything he wanted, but he's wearing tights.
Right.
The line delivery on a lot of those lines in that scene by Chris Evans solidified his acting ability if they hadn't already before.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Marvel owes so much to Chris Evans and the time he spent to get this role right and those lines right.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Almost as much as they do to Robert Downey Jr., I would think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Another reason I like the USO aspect is because they weren't willing to risk him on the battlefield.
Right.
Yeah. Because he was so special.
Yeah, Phillips said, well, I was promised an army. You are not enough. It wasn't even necessarily that they didn't want to risk losing him. It was more that they underestimated him.
It's true. Yeah.
They didn't think he'd be capable of all the things that he would later go on to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty evident in Chester Phillips', dismissal of him going after Bucky, the 107th Division.
Right. Yeah, that was a cool scene how Howard Stark and Peggy flew him in behind enemy lines. And he was like, all right, as soon as I jump, you get clear. And she's like, you can't give me orders. He's like, the hell I can't. I'm a captain. Fucking love that. God, that's so great. All right, let's skip ahead to the prisoner of war rescue at the Hydra facility.
Yeah, you don't typically think of, or at least I don't typically think of Captain America as a very stealthy figure. But here, he made his way in there pretty effectively.
Yeah, he did. I liked it. And he made his way toward the Howling Commandos, who we got to see in this film. I didn't think we were going to see them, and I was really surprised the first time I saw the film that we got to see, Dum Dum Dugan and the others. It was just kind of a little disappointing that Nick Fury wasn't with them. But of course, it doesn't work in the Marvel Cinematic Universe timeline.
I don't remember them saying anything about the Howling Commandos. I mean, the characters were there. But...
I mean, their reference to the Howling Commandos later on in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show. Mm-hmm. And when they're escaping the Hydra base, Dum Dum Dugan does say, wahoo! No, so he was doing the Howling Commandos yell. It was a really cool Easter egg, I thought.
It was kind of cheesy. I didn't know it was an Easter egg. I was like, oh, that was dumb. Why did you do that? Yeah.
Steve rescues Bucky from this experiment. It's kind of vague what's going on here. Like, I remember when I first saw it, I was like, okay, so Zola's running out of this room and Bucky's laying on this table and he's reciting his name and his rank and his division number and things like that, But we don't really know what was happening here. And it wasn't until the next film that we understand that Arnim Zola was somewhat successful in recreating Erskine's formula and was applying it to Bucky at that point. But upon first viewing, it was just really unclear.
I wonder if they had that plan all along from when they wrote this film.
I mean, I think they presented it in a way where they could go the Winter Soldier route if that's what they wanted to do. Or they could just write it off as, he was being tortured and not experimented on at that point.
Yeah.
If they didn't want to go the Winter Soldier route. So it was kind of brilliant, the options that they gave themselves through this scene.
Yeah, just like little seeds. Marvel's great at that.
Yeah. This was also the scene where we got the reveal of the Red Skull, where Hugo Weaving tears off his face mask, and we see the actual skull makeup.
That's freaking gross. When Captain America like punched him and his like eyelid was falling off, I was like, ugh! Ugh.
Yeah, it was really gross when you saw his eye sagging.
Right when he like ripped off his face and you saw, the Red Skull, I was like, oh, thank goodness. Ugh, so much better.
Yeah. After we see the Red Skull escape through his helicopter ship thing, and Bucky and Steve are trying to escape the exploding facility, there was a weird transition here where Captain America, he's jumping across the flames to get to the other side of the bridge, but halfway through the jump, the flames overtake him, and the film just kind of cuts away, kind of like a cliffhanger.
The editing in this film is not that great.
Yeah, I think that's one of the first moments where I realized that moment almost seemed more like an afterthought in post-production as opposed to something that was written to the script. It felt like there was supposed to be something more there, and that they just decided to cut or something.
There's a few moments where I'm just like later on in the film, like Captain America's like swinging across on a chain, and then
then nothing happens.
And then he's just running, and it's like, what?
I thought he was swinging. Why is he running now?
Exactly.
Where'd the chain go?
Exactly.
Yeah, there were definitely some editing problems with this film. After the POW rescue, he becomes, Captain America. We get the World War II montage.
And this is another bit where I don't really care for the editing.
Editing was weird, yes. I hate that they turned his entire World War II experience into a montage, because really I thought that this would be, the meat and bones of the story.
Right.
And it may be too much for one movie, everything that he did in World War II, according to the comics. He was fighting on almost every front of the war alongside his team, alongside Bucky. And probably would be too long of a movie, but I do hate the fact that they turned it into a montage, because it really brushed over what I thought was a lot of important moments in the character's history. And I was hoping after the movie was over that at some point they would revisit a lot of this World War II stuff in subsequent sequels, and they haven't really done that.
No. To me, this montage felt the least Marvel out of anything else Marvel has done.
What do you mean?
Like, it felt the least on brand. Like, I can't see another pulpy montage like this, sort of like tongue-in-cheek kind of montage in any other Marvel film.
It had the worst special effects, I think, out of any other scene in this movie.
Yeah, there was a lot of green screen, you can tell.
When he's jumping off the giant tank, which is something I've always wanted to see. I've read in the comics, moments where he's like one man going up against a giant, skyscraper-sized tank, and, he like manages to break the gears with his shield and things like that, just pulling off these impossible feats. And it was cool to see him take on this giant tank and everything, but just him leaping off of it in slow motion, obviously green screen, just like the lighting was so fake,
right,
and the explosion behind him, and it was just so weird.
And it's the slow motion that makes it pulpy, right? Yeah. You would not see slow motion like in Saving Private Ryan,
right,
or anything like that.
Yeah. And even the scene after that where they're going onto the train and, they're sliding on the rope and stuff like that, special effects on that were pretty bad too.
Yeah.
And even when Bucky died, like his fall.
Right. That made it harder to feel for Bucky.
Right.
It's like, that looks fake. I don't know.
The second half of the film, I think, was not quite as strong as the first half. They had a great setup. And then once they get into that montage, I think that the film's quality starts to fall apart a little bit. Let's move on to the final Hydra base fight, which starts off with this great homage to Return of the Jedi, which Joe Johnston did work on. And he also worked on Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh,
and you see a lot of like these little touches here and there from all these previous movies, which I appreciated, actually. I think they even used some of the same sound effects when the Hydra bikes are speeding through the forest alongside Cap's bike. And he takes out a lot of these Hydra bikes in the same way that
Luke Skywalker did.
I think it was Princess Leia that took out a lot of them, didn't she?
I don't remember.
But yeah, I like that. This chase could have taken place on the forest moon of Endor.
Even that, there was like a strange cut. When Chris Evans is sitting at the table, he's like, that's exactly what we're going to do. Then all of a sudden he's on a motorcycle driving. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, we're doing this.
Yeah, it was a little rushed. It was rushed at the end.
Like there was no establishing shot or anything like that,
Right. Yeah, that's true. So later on, when he infiltrates the base and catches up with the Red Skull's plane and gets on it, there's a moment where he's fighting these Hydra goons, and they fall out of the ship on one of those bomb plane things.
Yeah.
That was a really cool, effective action sequence. I think.
was cool. Yeah.
I was like, oh no, he needs to get back onto the ship, but he's on this plane fighting these guys, and he's on the exterior of the plane, and he's trying to fight this Hydra guy while trying to not fall off the plane.
Yeah.
And the propeller is so dangerous, and it totally fucking chops up the Hydra guy. That was a cool moment.
The violence in this is pretty PG until that moment. That was like blood everywhere.
Yeah. And then, he manages to pull the guy out of the cockpit and then pilots this bomb, this Tesseract-powered bomb, right back into the ship. And he doesn't land gently. He, crashes it back into the plane.
Yeah.
And nothing happens.
Right.
And that's a moment that really adds to my confusion later on in this scene. But we'll get there in a minute. First, let's talk about the Red Skull versus Captain America fight.
Uh-huh.
I thought it was really well done. I liked how Red Skull had his Tesseract-powered gun, and Cap had his shield, and they were going at it. They were even in zero gravity because they had pitched the plane forward and it was diving, things like that. I thought it was pretty cool. And what was kind of a disappointment, I think, was how it ended.
Right.
It was kind of a Deus Ex Machina kind of moment, and kind of actually a Raiders of the Lost Ark moment, where when the Red Skull picks up the Tesseract and holds it for the first time, he's transported
into space.
To Vormir, now we know.
Right.
But it was really unclear. It was kind of a little bit unsatisfying as to what happened there.
It was incredibly unsatisfying.
Yeah, because Captain America wasn't the direct cause of Red Skull losing it.
It was an accident.
Yeah.
It's like this huge, screenwriting no. You don't do Deus Ex Machina,
Yeah, to finish off your final villain.
But I'm not sure how else they would have done it. I think really they were looking for that iconic scene, from the comics of, the Red Skull holding the Cosmic Cube. And then they were like, oh, where do we go from here? I don't know. It goes into space.
And it's hard to explain why that happened if you didn't already know that was later going to be the Space Stone.
Exactly.
Because up to that point, we only knew that the Tesseract was an energy source. We didn't know it was, it could teleport beings to and fro.
Right.
Just a little weird. Let's talk about the ship crash. Do you think it was necessary for him to crash the ship?
No.
He was talking about how, he needed to crash the ship, otherwise it was going to fly into New York City, but he had control of the plane.
It's not like it was on autopilot.
Right, he could have circled around the Arctic Circle until they were able to bring him, an escape plan or something, and then he could have downed it, Or he could have went high up and then pointed it down and then jumped in one of those bomb planes and flown away from the crash site. I think he was afraid, everything was going to explode as soon as he crashed. But as we see, that did not happen. Those bombs never went off.
Yeah, I was super confused. Right when he started pitching the plane downward was when I was like, wait, you could control this thing. I think it would have been better if he didn't have control over it and he had to smash the controls with his shield, and that's what caused it to crash.
Or maybe something from the Tesseract, maybe there was some kind of energy surge that made the ship uncontrollable or something like that.
Right.
It was just weird that he had control and he chose. See, that makes him look suicidal. That doesn't make him look selfless. It makes him seem suicidal.
Right. The whole climax was very botched.
Yeah. They didn't need the sacrifice here.
Why not land the plane?
Well, maybe there's not a good place to land it. Well, I think that also the landing gear was jammed. I think they showed that in one of the heads-up displays.
Well, then why not crash it into the water? I was also wondering why he crashed on land. It's crash it into the water.
Maybe he didn't have a choice. I don't know. The last scene of the movie, he's back in the present. Another weird editing cut. We never got to see him frozen. We never got to see him revived. They had to kind of flash back to that in the Avengers movie to kind of show exactly what happened, because I'm not entirely sure if it's clear to audiences exactly how he was revived and things like that. I know as fans, we know that he was frozen.
Right. Even at the beginning, I was wondering, where is he frozen? It's not like the inside of the ship is filled with frozen water.
Right.
I almost think it should have been.
It should have been. Yeah. There were some creative decisions here that they just kind of screwed the pooch on.
Yeah.
But I do really like the cinematography and the music that they used when he was in Times Square.
Yeah, was that directed by Joss Whedon?
No, it was directed by Johnson, I think. It does kind of seem a little bit different from everything else that we've seen.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. It may have been a second unit director or something. Now that you mention it, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Joss Whedon, because they had Nick Fury on set that day.
Right.
And, at the very, very end of this film, we got the trailer to the Avengers film.
So we know that they had already started shooting that.
Right. Yeah, they had already shot a lot of it. So you never know. The last line of the movie is, "I had a date," and then it cuts to the end credits.
Yeah.
Which are very pompous and like a patriotic march.
Right.
There was a huge dichotomy between that feeling and the kind of poignant, somber moment of Steve Rogers' last line of the film.
I agree.
It was just a strange ending that felt incomplete to me. Like, again, like maybe it was probably a decision made in post.
Yeah, maybe.
It's possible. But, yeah, we really kind of harped on the movie for these past few 10 minutes, but really it's the second half of the film that really falls apart. The first half of the film is fantastic. I really enjoy it. It adds a lot of weight to how I feel overall about the film.
Yeah, there's a lot of great moments there that you can't take away from it.
Right.
You know, they definitely resonate.
Yeah. So overall, again, I do wish that they wouldn't have gone the pulp matinee serial route, but things being the way they are, I think they created a wonderfully fun, charming, earnest film that I really appreciate.
It was fun. It was successful. It was a successful take, ultimately.
Yeah, they made some great choices here in terms of characterization. You know, again, the only problems that I really have are probably just editing and style-wise. But as far as the character of Captain America himself, I was entirely satisfied. And they did a great job of setting him up for his later film appearances.
Yeah.
So yeah, have to commend it for that. I give it 3.5 stars.
I agree. To me, it's like borderline 3.5. It wasn't as well made as Wonder Woman.
Right.
I think it had more story flaws in it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the characters that save it. Red Skull,
Yeah.
Cap, Peggy, Erskine.
And as generic as they were, there's something just wholesome and something like you like those characters.
Yeah. All right, guys. Let us know what you guys thought about this movie by writing into us at dynamicduelpodcast@gmail.com, or you could reach out on social media by visiting us on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, and you can find our links to all of those social profiles by visiting dynamicduel.com. At dynamicduel.com, you can also listen to the podcast, and you can also find links to our merchandise store where you can buy a bunch of cool swag that we designed ourselves.
Yeah. Don't forget to rate, review, share, and subscribe. Again, as we mentioned earlier in this podcast, we are trying to reach 200 iTunes reviews specifically, or not even reviews, ratings.
Ratings, yeah.
And once we do that, we'll become eligible to become official Rotten Tomatoes critics, which is a dream of mine. So, I mean, if you could help out with that,
we would love you.
Yeah.
We love you. If you do that. We love you.
Don't make this awkward. Say it back. Say it back with a rating.
Yes, there you go. In our next episode, we will be kicking off like kind of our unofficial ramp up to the Aquaman movie by doing an Aquaman-based duel episode.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we're doing Mera versus Invisible Woman.
Right. Yeah, as you know, Mera is going to be one of the main characters in the Aquaman movie, and we thought due to her, water hardening construct powers, she'd be a good match for Invisible Woman, who could kind of do the same thing, but not with water, with her invisible force field powers.
Her invisibilities.
Right, exactly. So yeah, we'll see you guys in a week to talk about that.
Up and away.
True believers.